Now, when it comes to martial arts and when it comes to being Bodhidharma's disciple, part of that is, as I'm saying, for this instance and for other martial artists, for instance, is to differentiate being a superhuman with superhuman powers, which is an enlightened person who actually has real someone who has real superpowers. I'm just gonna say that because an enlightened person has real psychic powers, an enlightened person has real mystical powers that just initially from that standpoint just shows us how unevolved we are in fighting. Because I know that any fighter in the UFC could use real superpowers to their advantage. Now, I can see someone from the UFC taking this out of context. Someone taking the idea of enlightenment, which is what most people do, and they see it as someone just as a blank, staring figure. But it's not the case. But because what you try to depict in society and what you try to depict in movies as the hero, actually, because of all your past lives together, the expression of all your past lives outweighs probably times 9 all these characters that you're seeing in the movies and in the as actual characters. Because the expression of enlightenment and past lives as a fighter, if you in past lives were a fighter, then all of that is going to come through in your expression and your being, because it is molded as what your being is, as an accumulation of the expression of all your past lives. But then there's other people who for the most part, which is probably 80% of people, who become enlightened and they're not in tune with those type of past lives because they didn't have so many of them. And that's probably why they're becoming enlightened in this life, because they are a rare person with a innocent outlook on life, so they can see everything honestly and with an innocent outlook. For instance, a lot of the people from Japan who committed seppuku, and everyone was committing seppuku all around, it means that at an instant you're ready to kill yourself. So if you're from Japan in a past life, if you're studying with sword fighting or if you're studying with stick fighting, then you're probably a Japanese person in the past life. And the Japanese belief of seppuku is that if you lose your honor, so that if you, and it's translated into this life, if you lose your honesty, then you would kill yourself immediately. So then once you realize in your mind that it's not true, and then that it feels like you're not being honest with yourselves, then you start to meditate and you become enlightened. Actually, if you even look at a whole bunch of people's disciples, you could probably take at least 40% of them and say they were Japanese in a past life. But the people who were Japanese in a past life and who were very attached and affiliated with their honor, then it would be a lot easier for them to meditate and to kill themselves, because they're trained from a very young age to kill themselves at any moment in a gruesome way, which is stabbing yourself right in the stomach. The lower stomach area is where your first chakra, where all your energy comes from. So it's stabbing yourself right in the energy. So in the next life, that has a immense effect on this life and your expression and the feelings of this life that we have right here. So when someone's fighting, it's more like what you see from a kung fu standpoint, rather than somebody who's always training on the inside. So if somebody was to, for instance, always train in the forest and always train in nature, that person who's training in the forest and in nature is going to win against the person who's just training on inside that ring, because you're bringing with you the spirit of all your past lives, and so all your past lives are connected to the forest. It's just infinitely helping you and extantiguing your expression of whatever that is. So for instance, it's the difference between someone who trains naturally with their punches and who is very instinctual with their punches and fast with their punches, versus someone who's very has all that plus their chi, who has all that plus a clear mind. Because let's say a UFC fighter is trying to keep a clear mind so that they don't get distracted in the ring or whatever, or training to keep a clear mind, and if someone doesn't have a clear mind, he's gonna have the disadvantage in the fight. Now, if you have a clear mind, you have a better chance to come into that fight with the right attitude, and so that you're not swayed by your emotions in that way. So meditating in that way helps. If you're training in the forest, in that way it will help. And if you're training in the forest, that means you're going to do something that's unnatural to the fighting lingo. That's the same way when if Anderson hit somebody in the face, that's what the forest would do, and the forest would just win right away. So like all these fighters even still are eating meat so they become strong in their bodies. I don't think any of them are vegetarian in the UFC, because if you become in tune and you're that type of warrior spirit, then it's going to help you to be attached and one with nature, because then it's almost like the whole entire world fighting just a guy who trains, and just a guy who's trained.